Calling all FPL managers, you're going to want to make sure you watch this video before locking in your transfers ahead of Game Week 22. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video on my channel. My name's Sam, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and finally we can start to really put together the puzzle that is Game Week 22 and beyond, now that we've got a little bit more information and Game Week 21 is finally coming to a close. The first player I want to talk about today has been bought in by nearly 800,000 managers already ahead of Game Week 22, and it is pretty clear to see why. 12 points on return for Kevin De Bruyne after a long injury layoff reminded everyone just how much of an important player he is in Man City's structure. And it's pretty easy to see why he's going to be so popular when you look at the fixtures to come. Obviously, Burnley in Game Week 22 is a fantastic fixture to start off, and then we can look ahead all the way to Game Week 25, where Man City have that confirmed double game week against Chelsea and Brentford, both at home. So De Bruyne is going to be really popular. His ownership is rising very quick, and he's gotten a lot of price rises. He's also an elite player. I don't think anyone's going to argue out of the fact that he is a fantastic footballer, and if he's on the pitch, we expect him to have a pretty good chance of returning. Now, I wanted to target him first and foremost. I wanted to talk about him first up because I think there is a bit of a back and forth going around the FPL community whether or not he's going to be a good pick right now. Now, I can see arguments to both sides, and I've already discussed some of the pros there, but I would like to address a couple of the cons just so that you can make an unbiased and balanced decision on whether or not you think it's best in your team, whether to bring him in or not in the next game week. Now, on the negative side of things, he still hasn't started a game yet, so he is coming back from injury. I would obviously expect him to start getting those starts fairly soon, but it was a long injury layoff, and De Bruyne himself has said he's not ready to start games yet. So that Burnley home game coming after the Tottenham game in the FA Cup might not be the best opportunity for him to start. That being said, even if he didn't and he got 30, 45 minutes off the bench, there's still a decent chance that he returns. Although it is worth noting that, yes, he got a goal and an assist in 30 odd minutes the last time that happened. That's not going to happen every single time if he only gets 30 minutes a match. So I don't want people to start thinking that just because he did it once, that's going to happen every single week. Now, the other thing to think about is that money eventually will be pretty limited for us in our sides. Haaland is coming back at the moment. He's been spotted in training today, and with another week and a half to go before the Burnley game, there's a reasonable chance that if we don't want him for the Burnley game, we'll probably want him pretty quickly after that. So a lot of us are going to be spending money on Haaland. And then also in Game Week 25, it's pretty likely Liverpool get a double game week. And therefore, we're all going to be pretty tempted to bring in the likes of Mo Salah again. Now, it goes without saying, when you're squashing all of those three players in, and then probably the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold, maybe Phil Foden, the budget's going to get a bit tight. And I think Kevin De Bruyne is probably the one player out of those that, because of his price point and because he's still managing the minutes at the moment after a really long layoff, he might be one that maybe doesn't fit in too well. I think if you've already got him in your side, then it's an easy hold. And even if you don't have him, I can still understand why you buy him in now, but maybe just have in the back of your mind that he might just have to be a bit of a placeholder to get back to Mo Salah, because you're going to struggle to buy Mo Salah back without that money from the likes of De Bruyne if you're already spending it elsewhere, like Trent, like Haaland, like Foden, for example. Maybe even you're keeping one of Saka or Ollie Watkins as well. So De Bruyne will be popular. I can completely see why he is, but it's just worth noting some of those negatives just to make sure that you make a balanced and unbiased decision when bringing him in or not to your FPL side. So another player who's going to be very, very popular for the transfers in this game week is Diogo Jota. Now, again, getting the returns he has in the last few game weeks has made him probably one of the centre focuses for a lot of managers looking for a midfielder right now. And again, he's going to be a player that is very popular. He's getting good data, and more importantly than anything else, he's getting the FPL points right now. There's not really a lot going against him as a pick right now. He's pretty easy to get to, and as I mentioned, Liverpool are pretty likely to get that double in game week 25. However, it is worth noting, unlike Man City, if they do double in game week 25, it's because they're going to blank in game week 26. So if you're already piled up on 1 or 2 Liverpool and you're looking for a third, it is worth noting that if you get to game week 25 and you've got triple Liverpool, it's fantastic for 25, but then you might be a little bit stuck in game week 26 because you've still got 3 Liverpool. You might have issues elsewhere. It's pretty likely that Tottenham and Chelsea might blank that game week as well. So you might have a lot of issues to sort out with players blanking that game week and maybe a few transfers to make. Now, obviously, you could look at maybe using a free hit in game week 26 to get out of that, but there are going to be other opportunities to use the free hit, which I'll discuss in later videos, possibly this game week, where I look more into the chip strategy. However, that is a route that you could take, and Diogo Jota, if you're willing to take that route and pile all in on Liverpool, could be a really good pick for the next few game weeks. It is worth noting that he is massively overperforming the data at the moment. 0.39 XG per 90 and an XA per 90 of 0.19 is still very good, but it is an overperformance at the moment. So it should simmer back down. And again, once Mo Salah comes back into the team, that's 5 players jostling for 3 spots in Liverpool's front line. Jota has been excellent recently, but Darwin's been good recently. Luis Diaz has been good recently. And obviously Salah, if fit, will be a lock in that 11. So his minutes longer term, maybe not as secure, but certainly whilst Salah is injured / at AFCON, he's going to be a fantastic pick, and you could hold him all the way to that double game week if Salah's still out, and he could be a fantastic pickup around then as well. So yet again, we're talking about Bukayo Saka, and he is a player that probably will start dropping in ownership pretty quickly over the next few game weeks, especially if one fixture goes a certain way. So that fixture might seem pretty irrelevant to Saka and his appeal at the moment, but if you bear with me, I can explain why Chelsea versus Aston Villa in the Cup will be really important as to whether or not we want to keep Saka. Now, that game in particular will leave us with a lot less to figure out when it comes to who's going to blank or not in game week 29. If Chelsea get beaten by Aston Villa in the FA Cup in the next round, then it's guaranteed that Arsenal and Chelsea won't have a blank game week because they play each other in game week 29 when the FA Cup 6th round fixtures go ahead. Those I think are the quarterfinals. So with that in mind, if Chelsea lose in the FA Cup, then Saka's going to play in the biggest blank game week of the season, making him probably a pretty decent hold considering the data still isn't too bad at 0.7 XGI per 90. That's still pretty good, even if he's on a bit of a cold streak at the moment. The fixtures to come also aren't too bad. They're not amazing, but Liverpool and Newcastle, both at home at the very least, are the 2 toughest fixtures up until game week 26. And of course, they won't be blanking in 26 either, which will be a smaller blank game week that you want to have those players that are potentially on penalties, are talismanic. And Saka, even though he's not been at his full fit firing best recently, he's still a good player in a good side, and he will be popular in game week 26 when other teams are blanking. So I think it completely depends on that match, whether or not he's a good hold, but I do understand why people are selling him anyway. There are midfielders, as I've already started to discuss in this video, that are getting the points, that are getting those explosive returns. So even if he didn't blank in game week 29, I would still understand the logic. However, for now, in my team personally, I think there are bigger issues elsewhere, and Saka will probably be a make way eventually for me to get back to Salah in game week 25 for the potential double. For the time being though, I'm happy enough to hold, and I'm hoping that his decent underlying data is going to start repaying fairly soon. So we've discussed one half of the permutations for that Chelsea Villa Cup game, so let's discuss the other half. And the other player that could be a popular pick in the next few game weeks if Aston Villa are on the losing side of that Chelsea Villa FA Cup game is Ollie Watkins. He's still owned by over 50% of the game, and up near the top ranks, he's got about effective ownership of like 95 to 99% every single week at the moment. So he's still very, very popular. But again, a bit like Saka, he's not been getting the FPL returns recently, even though the data is still pretty decent. Now, with Ollie Watkins in mind in particular, those fixtures are probably better than Saka's are over the next 5. Now, again, they've got Newcastle home as well, but after that, Sheffield United, Man United, Fulham and Nottingham Forest, a great set of games, and again, they won't blank in game week 26. Now, if Villa do get beaten by Chelsea in the FA Cup, they'll also be playing in game week 29 because their opponents have already been defeated in the FA Cup. So they'll get the fixture there, which means Ollie Watkins, rather than Bukayo Saka, could be really popular in game week 29. So you might not want to sell him if he gets the game going ahead in that week, and you could sell Saka instead. Now, I think it's fairly clear that depending which way that fixture in the FA Cup goes, one of these two players will be more popular as a sell in the next couple of game weeks. But I don't think there's a massive rush to get rid of either right now. Yes, they've both been flattering to deceive a little bit, and the returns haven't really been there. But I've been kicked so many times by players that the data's still decent for, but the FPL returns haven't been there for the last few weeks. I've gotten rid of them, and then immediately they start returning again because they start performing on the data that they're putting up. Ollie Watkins has actually been one of those guys for me twice this season already, where I've sold him just as the returns were drying up, and then he goes and explodes yet again. So I'm very cautious about selling Ollie Watkins, especially with the fixtures coming up. However, it is worth noting that there's one other striker in particular that I've got my eye on ahead of game week 25 in particular that could tempt me to sell him eventually. And that striker, of course, is Ivan Toney. He's back from his ban after a long layoff. And of course, it was already written that he was going to score in that 3-2 win against Nottingham Forest last week. Now, the underlying data, I think we can pretty much forget it right now. 0.41 XGI per 90 is basically meaningless after one game. But we know from seasons past that Toney is a fantastic striker in a team that sets up to get him as many chances as possible. And again, he's on penalties, he's talismanic, and he does bury pretty much all of those penalties. He's got a very good record in front of goal. Now, the fixtures ahead on paper aren't amazing. However, it is worth noting that half of his Premier League goals last season came against top 8 opposition. So he does like the big matches, and Tottenham aren't exactly watertight at the back either. And then if you can kind of move past the Man City game in game week 23, which again, by no means is impossible that he scores in, after that, we're looking straight at the double in game week 25 against Liverpool and Man City away from home. Again, yes, on paper, that's not an easy double, but it is 2 fixtures when most other players and most other strikers have only got 1. And he's on penalties. He's got a great record, so I really wouldn't mind him then either. Now, Ivan Toney and indeed all Brentford assets do have the benefit that they probably have more games than any other club in the stretch between game week 25 to game week 29. Now, obviously, they've got the double confirmed in 25. That's really important. But not only do they have that, but they also don't blank in game week 26, confirmed. And they also don't blank in game week 29, confirmed. So Toney could be a really interesting pickup for the next few game weeks to help you navigate what is a fairly rough patch of fixtures for doubles and blanks over the next stretch, and it might help you avoid using something like a free hit to get out of trouble if you're 1 or 2 players down on what the template is, or maybe you can't put out a starting 11 in one of those 2 big blanks. Toney could help to navigate that pretty well, and considering how good he is as a striker and how talismanic he is, he might not be necessarily a transfer in for this week, but I've got my eye on him specifically ahead of game week 25, and then probably holding him all the way through to game week 29 or 30 when I'm likely to be looking at wildcarding. Now, we all know that Darwin Núñez is a bit of an enigma when it comes to FPL. The returns are there, 15 already this season, and the underlying data is also fantastic with an XGI per 90 of 0.92, which is absolutely unbelievable. That's really good, especially when you take into account his price at just 7.4 million. However, he is an extremely frustrating player to watch with your own eyes, and he can be very wasteful in front of goal when he's not feeling it. That being said, 2 goals against Bournemouth away from home makes it 4 returns in his last 3 game weeks, and I think we are starting to see the best of Nunez in recent weeks. Now, I think in a weird way it has actually helped having Salah out of the team, because he becomes more talismanic, he hoovers up even more of the chances, and it gives him just more opportunity to get those returns in. With that being said, I'm not sure whether he's a buy this week or a sell this week, or maybe somewhere in between. One way or another, he's going to be a hot topic for the next few game weeks, especially if Liverpool get that double in game week 25. He could be a really interesting outside shout for that double game week. And again, his ownership's probably going to start climbing if they get that double confirmed. The next 2 fixtures on paper don't look great, especially that Arsenal game in game week 23, but I really wouldn't worry about Liverpool scoring in any of the next 5 games, including the Arsenal game, and certainly not any of the others around it. 2 home games against Chelsea and Burnley, with the Arsenal game sandwiched in between. I wouldn't be worried about either of those 2 on either side of the Arsenal game. And then, like I said, game week 25 could be the double, and then 26 probably, if they get the double, would be the blank. So again, a bit like Jota, you don't want to overinvest in Liverpool if they get that double without having a plan to get out of that, or at least have a playing 11 in game week 26. But I think the upside's there, especially with the double game week potentially being a really good one, that tripling up on Liverpool, especially with explosive assets like Darwin Nunez, that could be a really fruitful idea, and it could set you up very nicely for that week. The returns are starting to flow. He is very frustrating, but if you put that to one side and just look at how he is as an FPL asset recently, he is actually a pretty interesting pick, and I've still got him in my starting 11 as it stands. The plan was to get rid of him for Haaland this game week, and truth be told, it is still something I'm considering, but because of how he's been performing recently, I am tempted to just hold on to him and hope that game week 25 comes around and most other people still haven't clocked onto the fact that Darwin Nunez is actually not a bad FPL pick at the moment. So finally, I wanted to round off this show with Richarlison. At just 7 million, he could be one of the bargains of the season in the time where Heung-min Son is away at the Asia Cup. He's still under 20% owned, unbelievably, just 11.5% in fact, is very, very low ownership. And to be honest, I'm thankful, because it meant that I didn't get punished last game week, even though he's now scored 6 goals in 6 games. He's looking fantastic value for money, and the fixtures to come are looking really good for Spurs, especially when you consider how attacking and how free-flowing Spurs are. Again, even without some of their key players, when you get Maddison back, when you get Son back, they're going to be even better going forward. And if Richarlison can stay in that centre-forward role, they are starting to really pick him out regularly, consistently, week in, week out. And he's starting to look much sharper in front of goal, and he's returning on very good underlying XG per 90 of 0.58, which again, I don't need to tell you, especially for a midfielder, or at least a classified midfielder in this game, that is incredibly good. Now, the one thing to note with Richarlison, and the reason that I wasn't that swayed to go with him last game week, is because it is pretty likely that he won't play in game week 26, because it will be, again, most likely a blank game week. Now, that is dependent on Chelsea going through in the Carabao Cup semi-final against Middlesbrough and progressing to the final, which would be played in game week 26. Now, obviously, Middlesbrough are winning that at the moment, and we will know more before the game week 22 deadline, because that match gets played this week. So we'll know for sure either way whether Richarlison will blank in game week 26 or not before the game week 22 deadline. So I would say, if Richarlison gets a full stretch of 5 fixtures here, no blank in game week 26, he's still a really good buy. However, if he gets that blank confirmed in game week 26 before the end of this week, I would probably urge a bit of caution, because any move you make for him is going to be with a fairly short-term horizon, especially if you're not planning on using that free hit in game week 26, because not only are you going to have Richarlison, a lot of managers also have Porro, a lot of managers have Palmer. Again, if there's a blank in game week 26, Chelsea will blank and Tottenham assets will blank, so that's 3 already. And then you've got Liverpool assets that probably get the double in game week 25. you're going to want 2 or 3 of them as well. And then all of a sudden you're looking at 6, maybe even 7 players in your team that are blanking in game week 26, and you might be forced into free hitting. So again, on the surface, he's a fantastic pickup. If Chelsea don't advance in the Carabao Cup final, I would probably just say buy Richarlison immediately if you can. But if they don't, and they do blank in game week 26, then have a think about what that means for your team if you buy another player that's blanking in game week 26, and whether or not you're going to have to use the free hit to get out of trouble in a few game weeks' time. Right then, so that's all from me for today's transfer tips ahead of game week 22. It's been good to be back, and I've really enjoyed filming this one. Hopefully you enjoyed listening, and if you did, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. In the meantime though, I'll be back with extra content ahead of the game week 22 deadline when we know just that little bit more information as well in the next few days. So do stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in the next few days as we start building up to game week 22 and beyond.